Hello there, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm very, very excited to be here with you this morning. And I want to talk about something that's really very near to my heart, if you will. And that's not in a way that it might seem. I want to talk about stress. Okay, stress is what got me into mindfulness practices on a personal level. Stress is what got me into wanting to teach mindfulness practices to other people. And stress is something that I've kind of moved away from a little bit in my work. I find that as I'm sort of, in my journaling practice every morning, sometimes I get into like, okay, where am I at? Where have I been? What's been going on and that kind of stuff. And what I've realized, and that's, by the way, a really, really beneficial thing to do, right? Just spend I say spend, I tell people as little as 1 minute because it's really just about opening the book and starting the writing process. Because once you've done that, it's almost impossible to stop after just a minute or two, right? So it usually winds up becoming, around like 10 minutes or so, maybe even 15. Some days where it's like you really get into it, I'm sitting there for almost an hour, when you have time, of course, you fit it in with life. But I cannot overemphasize the benefit of sitting with yourself for a few minutes every morning and just writing down what is coming up, what's processing through you right now. And there's a couple of things that this is turning into a journaling podcast episode. There's a couple of things that are really important about that, right? That number one, what we're doing is we're not, now look, there's lots of different ways to journal, lots of different reasons why someone might journal, right? Some people journal to try to work out problems, and some people journal as a matter of record so that they really keep track of their journal entries. I almost never read mine, okay? Because for me, journaling is about going through that process, right? Letting the dots connect, letting things flow, letting things arise and seeing what it is. Because almost every time what I start writing about and what I finish writing about have nothing to do with one another, right? And that's kind of the beauty of the process, right? That and that's the second thing is that by sort of stepping into that process, we're giving our mind a propulsion, like a motivation, a momentum, if you will. It's like shoving a boulder and then it starts rolling. As the boulder rolls, we don't know which way it goes, but without that force of starting it, the boulder just sits there, right? So anyway, getting back to what I was saying, this morning in my journaling, it really became very much about like sort of like my work and my, sort of business, if you will. I don't really consider, I did the air quotes for all of you listening on the podcast, but I don't consider this a business, right? And I don't consider it, something other than a business either. So it's kind of a weird, undefined thing, I guess you could say. But in my work, in the way in which I help people, with learning these practices, I have found that over the last couple of years, I've really sort of wandered and said like, okay, well, how can I help people? What is the new thing I can do to help people? And what I want to try to do now is I want to try to get back into the stress, right? Not that I want to get back into stress in my own body, but that's definitely not in the cards. But I do want to start refocusing on, on helping people who are experiencing stress. So if that happens to be you, please listen to the rest of this episode, and please feel free to reach out, even if you just want to chat for a minute, and even if you want to be like, I always thought I understood stress, but maybe blah, 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 right? Like whatever it is. I'm here to help. That's really what I'm doing. Like I said, it's not a quote unquote business for me. It's a calling, if you will, right? It's something I feel that I need to do, right? Because I know the need is there in a sense. And I think that really does boil back down to stress, right? Because most of us, at one point, I can't find the statistic again, but at one point, I read a statistic that said, and this was a few years ago, 77% of American adults describe experiencing chronic stress, and that they worry that it's impacting their health. but yet there's nothing that they do about it, right? Because a lot of times we feel like there's nothing we can do about it, right? Like we say, I have a stressful job, or I have a stressful life, I have kids, I have this, I have that, I have car payments, I have mortgage payments, I have, the full catastrophe, as Zorba the Greek would have said, and John Kabat-Zinn would have quoted him for saying. John Kabat-Zinn wrote a book called The Full Catastrophe Living, that he tells in the book, he talks of Zorba the Greek, and that's where he lifted that line, the title, The Full Catastrophe, because Zorba was asked, are you married? And he says, am I not a man? I have a wife, I have a house, I have a job, I have children, I have a dog and a cat, and I have the full catastrophe, right? Which is to say that life is this, wild ride that we're on, right? And it is very catastrophic sometimes, but that doesn't mean that catastrophe has to be bad, right? And that's where stress comes in. Okay, so Hans Selye is was one of the pioneers in the science of stress, and going back to I think he started his work maybe even in the 30s, right? He wrote a couple of books in the 50s, and that was at the end of his career. Pardon me. And so Hans Selye very famously said that almost all the stress that people experience is emotional stress, right? So let that sink in for a second. The stress that you feel, the stress that you experience, the thing that you say, I am so stressed, blah, 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 is emotional stress, which means that it's not the job. It's not the kids. It's not the house, not the dog, it's not the cat, it's not the lawn that needs to be mowed, it's not the oil that needs to be changed in the car, it's not the bills that need to be paid. The stress is in the emotions that are connected to those things. Now, this is the really important thing to understand. So one way that I can describe this to you is that we all, there's not just... Pardon me, back up. Sometimes my brain works a little faster than my mouth can work. So when we experience stress, right, or let me back up. There are two kinds of stress that we can experience. Okay, and these terms come from Hans Selye. They're kind of outdated, but I love them. So the first is called eustress, eustress. Okay, that's one. The second, which is the most common one, the one that we're always talking about when we say, oh, I'm so stressed, or my life is such so difficult, or I feel so wound up, or I can't handle the tension and all that kind of stuff, right? That is called distress, distress. Now, that one's pretty obvious, right? We can say, I know distress. Every one of you who has experienced stress in your life, just said, I get distress. You don't have to tell me a thing about it, right? So let's talk about eustress, right? Because that's the one that's very, very seldomly talked about. And so eustress, picture going on a roller coaster for most of us, or for many of us, some of us. Picture going on a roller coaster. But whatever it is that makes you really excited, right? So for some people, like me, that's a roller coaster, right? Or maybe even going skydiving or something like that, right? But for other people, it could be going to antique stores, or it could be playing darts, or it could be, playing pickleball. It could be whatever it is that makes you excited, right? The point is that the thing that happens in your body, so I'll talk about myself because I can describe my own experience very well, or it's better than I can describe your experience because I don't even know your experience. But if I go on a roller coaster, right, it's exciting for me. Right, I am not. I'm feeling the excitement of being there. I'm putting the seatbelt on. I'm like, oh boy, this is gonna be fun. Right now, in the process of the roller coaster, my body is excreting through my adrenal glands adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine, which are flooding through my body, which are causing my heart rate to increase, causing my blood pressure to rise, causing my respiratory system to become quick and short. It's causing my senses, so my eyesight gets sharper, my my hearing and my taste, everything is going to get sharper and more acute. Even the hair on the outside of my body is going to stand up, and like feeling for vibrations. But there's no fear involved. I'm excited. This is fun. But those things that I just mentioned to you, the heart rate, the blood pressure, the hairs on the outside of your body, your sensory, organs, all of that stuff is also what happens when you're looking at the tax return and realizing that you owe money instead of going to get money back this year. It's the same as, not knowing where your children are at any given moment. Like, oh crap, where's my daughter? She's supposed to be home. That feeling in your body is the same feeling that I have when I go on the roller coaster. The difference between the two, the difference between eustress and distress, is the emotion of fear. Now, fear is sort of seen on a very broad way as the basis of all of what we call negative emotions, right? All negative emotions are rooted in some kind of fear, which is to say avoidance, right? Like it's the emotion of like, get away from me, right? But that could be grief, that could be anger, that could be resentment, that could be, all kind, anything on that sort of, what we call the negative side. Now, that doesn't mean that they're bad, right? Fear is not bad. Without fear, you probably wouldn't be alive to listen to this podcast here. If our ancestors 200,000 years ago didn't have fear, then they would have been wiped out by saber-toothed tigers, right? Like we wouldn't be sitting here, right? So fear is not bad. It's actually very beneficial. But how often is it that we're actually afraid of something that is actually happening? And that's the question, right? Because that is very, very rare for most of us. Now, it's not all of us, right? There are people who live even in this country that we live in, that's the most wealthy country on the face of the earth. There are still people who live with constant fear of actual danger, right? Like people who live in areas where violence is prominent and prevalent. Places where, in certain areas of this country, if you are, if your skin is dark, black or brown, you're more likely to be arrested by the police, right? Like a lot more likely. Even for the same behavioral that white people go through, right? So anyway, I don't want to get into the politics of all that, but the point is that there are people in this country, people you might even know, who do live in fear of physical danger, right? And that's certainly true also of, people who do, like climb bridges for a living and stuff like that, right? Like there is a healthy fear that goes on with that, but they don't feel stress because they've managed that fear. But anyway, let's not talk about that because that's like the radical. Let's talk about most people, right? Because most of us are not doing those really dangerous jobs, right? So for most people, the stress that we feel, again, it's not in the tax return. It's not in the I'm late for work. It's not in the oil change that needs to happen, or the lawn that needs to be mowed, or the Christmas tree that needs to be taken down, or whatever it is, right? The stress is in the emotion that we attach to that thing, okay? And this is really, really important to understand because without that emotion, then it can become excitement, right? It can be something that drives us. And so that's where it's really, really important in the service of managing our stress. It's important to understand and to recognize and to see that emotion that's happening as it's happening. In the episode before last, I talked about the three realms in which we experience our lives, right? Experience everything, right? Every single nanosecond that you've been alive, you have experienced that nanosecond and every other one in your thoughts, in your emotions, and in your body. Every single thing. That's how we're experiencing it, okay? And we remember that is those three realms of our experience are not just sort of three things that are sitting out there not connected to each other. They're not even just connected or just correlated to each other. They are causative. They create and influence and promote each other. Okay? Which is to say that when because here's the thing, right? If stress is there to help us to survive something, that's what it's there for, right? As I mentioned, our ancestors 200,000 years ago who were, experienced stress when they saw a saber-toothed tiger, right? Or I mentioned the minority of people I don't want to use that word, but the few people or the relatively few people in this country who live, not in safety, that they live in a reality that there's danger, right? The kids walking home from school, experience danger and violence, right? That is a segment of the society. For those people, it's not an emotional stress. For those people, the way that the body is, again, sharpening the senses so that they can recognize danger faster. It is, causing the heart rate and the blood pressure and the respiratory system and everything to quicken and heighten and increase. And it's doing that so that we can run or we can fight, right? That's what it's there for. And it's there for a very specific reason for that, right? Now, here's the thing. This system is designed to work in danger, right? So you see danger, you run from danger, and then if you're lucky enough to survive that danger, well, now your body comes back down. You stop feeling all of that stress. You stop, the cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine cease to run through your body, and your body returns back to its, baseline of not stress, right? What we call, what I'm describing here is the sympathetic nervous system, right? That drives everything up. And then, and then once the danger is over, what we call the parasympathetic nervous system takes over and calms us back down. We go from fight or flight to rest and digest. Okay? Now, that's the way the stress response is supposed to happen. That's how it happens for, police officers who experience, violence, for people who are unfortunate and living in circumstances that are not safe. It's what soldiers experience in times of war and conflict. It's what a gazelle experiences when a cheetah is chasing her, right? But that's not 77% of American adults right there. The stress that we feel, or that I used to be part of that 77%, but the stress that is felt by that 77% is felt when they're sitting at a desk looking at their tax return. Or they're, on their phone, looking at their bank statement. Or they're writing a check and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have enough money. Or they're, worried, they're sitting there at night in their bed thinking about their, boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife. Or they're thinking about, their mortality, their own mortality. They're not in a physical danger in those moments, right? You're lying safely in bed right now. Everything that's causing the stress, whether it's your mortgage, your car payment, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever it is coming completely from the thoughts, okay? It's the story that we're telling ourselves. I haven't heard from my girlfriend tonight, so therefore she's, being unfaithful to me. And I'm going to find out in 2 days from now, and everything's going to be over. My whole life is going to be different. I should have stayed with that girl 3 years ago. We'd be married now and having kids, right? That story going through the mind causes an emotion to be experienced, right? It causes an emotion to happen. And that emotion, in all likelihood, if we're thinking in those terms, in all likelihood, that emotion is going to be fear on some level. But again, fear gives way to grief, to anger, to resentment. It all starts with the sense of there's something wrong, right? then that fear creates the stress in the body. Now, here's the important part of this. Okay, remember I said it's a cycle. It's not just a one-way, three-stop, railroad, right? It's a cycle. So as my body feels that tension from the cortisol, the adrenaline, the norepinephrine that's coursing through my veins right now, and my body starts feeling that tension, my brain, where my thoughts happen, recognizes that something's wrong in this system. We're going nuts here. This is not good right now. So what my brain does then is it creates, and it's a question whether it's the brain or the mind, and let's not get into that right now, but the mind and the brain create thoughts now, create a story now that gets more and more alarming. Because my nervous system also recognizes that there's no change in the circumstances, so the danger must still be present. But the danger was never present. The danger was only internally. Now, this doesn't just happen when we're sitting there at night, right? This is what we're thinking about when we're driving our car. This is what is going on in between our meetings, in between all the stuff that we have to get done. This sort of vacuum is filled by, whenever we're in a moment of idleness, that vacuum is filled with this process. That's why they call it chronic stress. And ultimately, this becomes your personality like it did mine. And believe me, even now, 10 years later, I'm still finding sort of artifacts of this personality. I can tell you, things are completely different. Completely different. But there's something that's still there. There's something that still is like, I still respond in certain aspects or certain circumstances and certain experiences. I still respond in the same way with that tension. And here's the thing, right? And because I practice mindfulness, I'm aware of the story. I'm aware of my body. I'm aware of my emotions. And so when I feel that tension, I notice the story becoming more and more pessimistic, more and more alarming, more and more, crap. I got to do something here. But what I recognize is as soon as I see, wait a second, your body is making this happen, all of a sudden it starts to change. Which is to say that if as you're sitting there worried about the bills or whatever, if you can take a few moments and calm your body down through breathing work, through just getting up and exercising, through having a glass of water. By the way, I'm going to have a sip. That feels good. And then you believe that this stuff is actually happening because that's really what stress is. Stress is a transaction between what we're experiencing and what we believe we can handle. If that comes out in the black, hey, we're good. If that comes out in the red, here's the story. Right? And so if we can calm our body, if we can bring ourselves back to a state of baseline homeostasis where everything's just working the way it's supposed to, my blood pressure is back, my heart rate is back, my respiratory system, everything's back into that rest and digest phase. Well, guess what changes? The story changes immediately. As soon as, and again, even as because remember, Hans Seeley said that it's emotional stress. So really what we're changing, even though we're starting with our body, really what's changing there is that we're no longer afraid. Now, why is this important, right? Well, it's important because long term, the stress is what creates horrible diseases that end people's lives early, right? So that's why it's so important. Because we think we can deal with it because we've always been dealing with it, right? We think like, oh, I just have a stressful life, but it's okay. I'm just doing it. It's just my life. It's just the way it is. It's okay. And we're just rolling the dice, hoping that we don't, get cancer or something, right? But that's where, one of the things that's happening in the stress response is also the immune system is picking up on all this and saying, wait, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. And it's pulling all the alarm bells that it can, which means that your immune system is attacking itself. It's trying to find something for the natural killer cells to go get and fix because there is no real danger. Right? Now, it's okay if while I'm being chased by a cheetah, my immune system starts freaking out too, because as soon as the cheetah's gone and I'm lucky enough to have survived it, my immune system goes back to not attacking anything anymore because it recognizes, my whole system recognizes the threat is over. It's time to rest now. But I can't do that while I'm sitting at the desk and just, stuck in the cycle. Now, another reason why this is really, really important, and this is what I had in my notes to talk about, so talk about burying the lead, but it is said by neuroscientists who are far more educated and more experienced than me, not smarter, but more educated and more experienced than me, that they call the hormones of norepinephrine, adrenaline, and cortisol, they call them the non-creative chemicals, right? And that's what's happening, right? When we're experiencing that stress and those hormones are rushing through our body and our body is in that state of what we call hyperarousal, right? That's survival mode for us, right? That is our body simply trying to make it to the next minute, right? Just surviving what is happening right now. Now, again, if what we're trying to survive is something that's always there, like a 30-year mortgage, well, guess what? It's never going away, right? But the important thing that I'm trying to tell you here, right, is that as I'm in that stress response, I can't figure out new solutions to the problem. I can't figure out how I'm going to pay the mortgage better. I can't figure out how I'm going to, mend my relationship. I can't figure out how to get a job that's going to be, more healthy for me. Right? Because I'm stuck in this survival mode of my brain, my nervous system, my mind, my hormonal system, everything. The endocrine system, pardon me. And so when we get into this, right, when we are stuck in that place, and again, 77% of American adults report chronic stress. Not, I had that few minutes of stress last year, right? No, like every day. And when we're in that position every day, all we're doing is going through the motions of our lives. We're just trying to get through it. And all your body is concerned about is getting through it. And so it's just grinding and grinding and grinding. It's like driving a car at 100 miles an hour all the time. Would you do that to your car? That would kill your car in no time. Well, I'm afraid it's doing the same thing to your body. And so that's why this is so important, because we get stuck in it and we don't recognize that we're stuck in it. And once we're in it, again, it sort of feeds itself. It becomes its own thing that makes it even harder to even see that we're in it. And that's where mindfulness practices really come in. And that's where they really are. Now Jon Kabat-Zinn started the mindfulness-based stress reduction clinic in 1979 in the University of Amherst. And this was in a hospital setting, right? To the University of Amherst, Boston, UMass Hospital in Boston, pardon me. But this was people who were in hospital because of the damage to their body from the stress. But the problem is that how are you going to heal the body if the stress is still happening? And that's where Jon Kabat-Zinn made his mark on the world of stress. Thank goodness. He's a wonderful, beautiful human being for doing that. But you're not in a hospital, I presume. I did for a full year, every Sunday night, I did a webinar for, I think it was actually like 54 weeks or something, like 2 weeks more than a year. Every Sunday night, I did about a 90-minute webinar, and I called it How to Tame Stress and Eliminate Reactivity in Less Than 8 Weeks. Basically, it was an introduction to mindfulness. I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people sign up for this webinar. Most of them attended, not all. and a lot of them became clients. And a lot of them today are relatively healed. They no longer live with the stress. They no longer live with that constant feeling of life is a disaster. Life is horrible. Life is going to blow up on me any second now. I mean, powerful stuff. There's, one person who was terrified of flying. She couldn't fly without medicating herself. Now, hey, 2 layovers, 2 connecting flights, no problem. Let's do it. I'll bring a nice book. There was a point where she literally would grip the armrest for the whole flight. I'm another person who used to, when she would feel like a discomfort, like a tightness in her chest, which was just stress, she would literally pull into the parking lot of a hospital because she was sure she was having a heart attack. Not once, not twice, like daily. I mean, this is people who literally are now living their lives. This person with the hospital parking lot, she's fine. She has she sends me emails sometimes and like, I can't believe who I am now. And this is like a 12-week process. I mean, in the webinar, I said 8 weeks. I've extended it to about 12 because I think most people need that sort of time to really, I teach all the practices you need. I teach in the first 6 weeks, but then we have another 6 weeks of reaffirming and reinforcing and just getting them deeper and deeper in, So anyway, let me break here now because we're already at 31 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed this. This was just sort of again, one of those stream of consciousness kind of things in a way. But it's sort of a welcoming, a homecoming, if you will, back into the idea of stress. So you're going to hear me talk about this a little bit more, or maybe a lot more, in the coming episodes, which I'll do like once or twice a week, as we've said. But if you want to talk about this, okay, if you want to find out about my program or any of the programs that I'm offering right now, there's nothing really going on specifically in terms of, sometimes I do these specific programs targeted at certain areas in our lives, but those are because of the stress that's impacting those things, right? So like when I do relationship coaching, right, it's because stress is a problem for the relationship, right? When I do parenting coaching, right, mindful parenting coaching, it's because the stress is making you parent in a way that is not healthy, right? And so it all boils down to stress. And so that's why I'm sort of again, homecoming back into the world of stress, which is the world that I really know, because again, stress almost killed me, it almost killed me. And I'm here to tell the story. All right. So anyway, if you want to talk about any of this, please shoot me an email, art@artburnscoaching.com. Otherwise, anyone who is still listening, I should always say this in the beginning. If you're watching this on YouTube, please, please, please subscribe, share, like the video. Please, please. It really, really does help get more eyeballs on this work. And if you're listening to it on the podcast, I don't know what you can do there. I'm not really much of a podcast guy myself. I'm more of a YouTube guy. Even though sometimes I play the YouTube video and don't listen to them and don't watch them, I just listen. So I'm not anti-podcast. but if you're on the podcast, I think there's a way you can go on Apple and rate it on a 1 to 5 star kind of thing. I'm not sure about Spotify or any of the other platforms, but if you can, please do. Okay. And also, I'd love to see comments on YouTube or the podcast. I don't know if you could do comments on podcasts, but anywhere you can comment, please do. I'd love to hear what you think about my work. I really do. All right. Thanks a lot for listening and thanks for watching. And I will be back in a couple of days. I wish you well. And again, if you need help with this, if anything I said today resonates, it's worth reaching out. Okay. Because coaching in this stuff can be very affordable too. Okay. Don't think that this is, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars of investment. It doesn't have to be that. Okay. All right, everybody. I wish you well, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.